for everybody for coming to my talk today. So today, the topic is speaking the unspeakable in Chinese. And there may be some small ambiguity, just in case you start the other way. I'm not going to teach you how to talk about unspeakable in Chinese, or we're not going to learn how to we are going to learn how the Chinese talk about counterfactuality. So talk about something that is not happening, or will not happening, or didn't happen in the real world. First, let me say something about counterfactual or counterfactuality. So counterfactual is a grammatical construction that expresses or make reference to situations that are contrary to the fact. It's a very easy concept to counterfactual. And so, for example, example 1, example 2 are examples, typical examples from English, telling people what counterfactual is. I wish I was an astronaut, or if I had been to the moon, I would have seen it. And you might have noticed in English resorts to the past tense, verbal past tense, to show counterfactual. And if you studied English as a second language, or probably even I guess in American high school too, I don't know if in America, I don't know if they're introduced as subjunctive mood. Is that the case in America? That's what we learned when we were in China. We were told this is subjunctive mood, but later on we will say that really it's not quite subjunctive. It's more counterfactual. Subjunctive involves the morphology, but English doesn't have the specific morphology for subjunctive like French, Spanish, or other languages. If you study French or Spanish, you really have to spend time memorizing what the subjunctive form is. But if you study English, it's just a structure. There's no verbal morphology. And so this is something called a fake past tense, because really it's not past tense. I wish I was an astronaut has nothing to do whether you were an astronaut before or not, which is a fake past tense. The past tense there has something to do with wishful thinking or counterfactuality. It has nothing to do with time reference. And such fake past tense usage is very widespread. It's very common in European languages. A lot of Indo-European languages use fake past tense when it comes to counterfactuality expression. And also it can be found in many other languages. So for example, examples 3 and 4 are from Farsi. Farsi or Iranian is a language spoken in Iran. So for example, in Farsi, number 3, I, astronaut, be, means I am an astronaut. So and the Farsi has a subject, object, verb structure. So they say I, astronaut, am. And that's a statement, declarative. But in number 4, it's a counterfactual example from Farsi. So you say, wishing I, astronaut, past tense be, means I wish I was an astronaut. So you can see in Farsi too, another Indo-European language, if you want to talk about wishful thinking, you have to use past tense, the verb to be, past tense with the verb to be. And this happens in Japanese too. Japanese is not in European language. It's quite not related, quite different from European languages. So for example, in Japanese, in order to say, if John were there now, I would talk to him. So this is a counterfactual expression. It doesn't matter whether John is not here, but you want to say something about if he was here, suppose the situation. So the structure is if John now there be at, past, discuss, past maybe. So you still use past tense to talk about counterfactuality. So and also the past tense. Not every language uses past tense, but for example in French they use imperfect. The imperfect, something similar to English past tense. He studied French. So they use imperfect for counterfactual situation in a conditional clause. And also in German and Italian, they use a past subjunctive, like the English. If I had been to the moon, for example. But overall, verbal morphology is really important in European languages when it comes to talking about counterfactuality. Then why do so many languages target the past tense? Basically there's past tense, present tense, and future tense, and some other languages have some very more detailed tense, recent past, distant past. But why past tense? So Yachidu argues that the use of past tense is to create another world reserved for counterfactual reasoning. She calls it an exclusion operator that excludes the utterance of the extra world. So in order to talk about a counterfactuality, you have to create another world. And the past tense is a very good candidate for such a purpose. Because if it's in the future, probably it hasn't happened yet. If it's right now, they're right in front of your eye. And, but its past tense can be reserved for functioning as the exclusion operator. Okay. And also the exclusion operator. So exclusion operator is a very important concept in counterfactuality construction because it creates a world that's different from the real world we are in. So it's exclusion operator. Can also be a spatial particle or exclusion. So for example, Burmese. And Burmese, in order to say to be, if he took the medicine, he would have gone better. He would have gotten better. So there's a particle K, K-H-E. So let's take a look at 2A. So snake scare, K, declarative. Means I scared the snake in another place before I arrived here. So you can see the K indicates another place. And also Burmese is also a SOV language, subject, object, verb. So you say I, they can drop the subject too. I, snake, scare. And the same particle K is used in 2B too. Medicine, drink K, if stay good, come K, predicate irrealis. So if took the medicine, he would have gotten better. So if a language doesn't resort to past tense, which is related to time as a counterfactual exclusion operator, the language can use a spatial exclusion operator. Anyway, the bottom line is that you have to create another place, another time situation to provide you with the space to talk about counterfactuality, either past tense or spatial exclusion. Okay, but the problem is not every language has tense. And Chinese is such a language. Chinese doesn't have tense. It doesn't mean that Chinese people do not know how to talk about the past, but they do not rely on past tense. We rely on something called time reference. We have a way of letting you know I'm talking about something in the past, although not by means of a past tense. So for example, number 8, I be teacher. It's an ambiguous sentence in Chinese. It can either mean I was a teacher or am a teacher, so depending on the context. So number 9 is not ambiguous. Number 9 shows that if you add some past time reference adverbs, the sentence is anchored in a specific time. So number 9 with the adverb, temporal adverb, it can be non-ambiguous anymore. So if you say I before be teacher, means I was a teacher before. If you say I now be teacher, means I am a teacher now. So you can see the verb to be is shi. It doesn't change. What changes the adverb. So some linguists have argued that non-verbal morphology, but adverbs are more reliable for time reference. So it's really the adverbial. If a language doesn't have the tense marking, it's more the adverb. This happens in English too. English past tense English tense is not always trustworthy. If you use an if clause, if you want to talk about something in the future, you have to use the present tense. If he gets up early tomorrow, he gets up early, it's present tense, but still use it to talk about something in the future. So there's not a one-on-one completely truthful connection between time and time reference and tense. And indeed, Yachidu was right. Chinese doesn't have tense, therefore it's really hard for Chinese speakers to create a counterfactual situation without the use of tense, because there is no tense and no distinction between counterfactual and factual. So number 10, I 希望, 希望 can be translated to English either as hope or wish. I 希望 I can help you. It's ambiguous. Can either mean I hope I can help you. This is not subjunctive. This is not counterfactual. It's ontic or factual. I hope I can help you. I mean, do you need any help? I hope I can help you. And if you understand it as wish, it means I wish I could help you. It means I'm sorry, I know you are asking for help from me, but unfortunately, I cannot help. I wish I could help you. So it's ambiguous. So in order to interpret number 10, context is really important, or your knowledge of the world's knowledge is really important. And number 11, if tomorrow rain, I then not come. It's ambiguous again. Can either mean if it rains tomorrow, I won't come. It's just we're laying out the possibility, the situation regarding whether it come or not. Or it can also mean if it rains tomorrow, I will not come. So that means we know for sure it's not going to rain tomorrow. But just in case, or counterfactually, if it rains, I will not come tomorrow. So you might think it's too. I know it's hard for English speakers to believe. How can a language not be capable of expressing factual versus counterfactual? I think it's a very good question. But my impression, being a Chinese speaker, that I never thought, why do you bother to let people know? It really is not necessary. Why do you have to know whether it's possible or not? It's really never occurs to us. And you can imagine when the Chinese speakers learn English is a very big problem for us. Usually, the subjunctive or counterfactuality comes at the very end of the English textbook. I think it's until the last year of the English studies started studying counterfactuality. Because first we have to understand what counterfactuality is, and then you have to learn how to realize counterfactuality. And you might not be alone believing that Chinese speakers have trouble reasoning counterfactually. So there's a very famous, or almost notorious now, case in 1981 by Bloom. And Bloom argues that the lack of linguistic means to mark counterfactuality in Chinese influences the cognitive behavior of speakers of Chinese. They are less likely to reason counterfactually. And so what that means is that because the Chinese language doesn't have counterfactuality marking, therefore the speakers cannot reason that way. As I just said, I don't understand why we even bother to understand the difference between factual and counterfactual. And his test result evidences the weak form of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is usually studied as a linguistic one. It's a very basic concept. It's called sometimes it's called also linguistic determinism. Basically, said that languages influences thought, and linguistic differences entail corresponding cognitive difference. Basically, means the way you speak will affect the way you think. So a very famous example is in the Inuits see snow a lot, so they have 500 words for snow probably. But for, let's say, a person who lives in Hawaii, probably their language, of course, probably doesn't have word for snow. Because their language doesn't have a word for snow, neither does their language have 500 words for snow. Probably when they see snow, they just see snow. They don't see the different layers of snow. And but immediately this was in the early 1980s. So immediately there were a lot of people arguing against Bloom's study results. And some people, so for example, some people have pointed out the design problems and other possible explanations of the data Bloom has collected. So for example, Chinese students are now used to elaborating on paradoxical questions. So some people say it's really educational system difference because a lot of the subjects were Chinese college students. And for example, if you ask a Chinese student, if all circles were large and this small triangle were a circle, would it be large? So for Chinese students are really not used to thinking like this. So when they have trouble, when they respond slower than American students, probably the reflection of the expectation in the educational system. And also Chinese culture bloom amidst the still Chinese culture tends to be more practical. So it's, the Chinese people are really, they might be more interested in thinking about questions that are realistic, that are solvable. So for example, one of the questions he asked the native speakers of Chinese is, if the Hong Kong government were to pass a law requiring that all citizens born outside Hong Kong make weekly reports of their activities to the police, how would you react? So I don't know how English speakers respond to this. It's a kind of, it takes a while for you to think about a very unlikely situation like this. And also, he tested the speakers first, the Chinese speakers first in English, first in Chinese. That assumed that they must be bilingual. They must understand English and Chinese at the same time. But the Chinese questions were reported to be very poorly translated. So for example, they left out a lot of the modal verbs. Modal verbs like auxiliaries, like can, should, must, and whatever. And we'll see that modal verbs are really important in Chinese when it comes to interpretation, the interpretation of counterfactuals. And also the uncontrolled subjects. It's, for example, he compared the data of his American subjects where his students Swarthmore College, a very good college in America, but he just selected some groups, randomly groups from Chinese, and also he compared the data from Chinese. But anyway, the data is not very well controlled. So so of course, the Swarthmore students might function cognitively, especially when they speak their native language, they can do much better than the Chinese students who use English as a second language. And Terry All in 1993 challenges Bloom translation test method and the linguistic determinism, and she rewrote the text and concluded that there was no convincing evidence that the lack of a distinctive counterfactual mark in Chinese hinders counterfactual reasoning. So she tried another method, and her conclusion was different from Bloom's conclusion. But yeah, and Gettner 2005, they did the research again, and they found out that English speakers do have some accuracy advantage when specific contextual information was required to detect counterfactuality, but not other counterfactualities. What they mean is that if you really, when faced with a sentence, and you have to decide whether the sentence is counterfactual or not counterfactual, when the grammar alone is not enough, you have to go out to find some contextual information. Usually English speakers do better than Chinese speakers. So they can seek information from the language, and then if they fail, they go to the context. But for Chinese speakers, they go directly to the context. So in some situations, it's true, English speakers can process counterfactuality better than Chinese speakers. And Wu, 1989. So people have been talking back and forth, saying whether do the Chinese have the ability to reason counterfactually. And Wu did his dissertation in 1989, giving specific examples to show that Chinese, the language indeed has counterfactuality constructions, although it's different from the English language. So for example, there's context. Number 12. He not order meat as if vegetarian. 他没吃肉，好像吃素. So this sentence is ambiguous. It can either mean he didn't order meat as if he was a vegetarian, or it can mean it looks like he's a vegetarian. So as if he was a vegetarian means probably he's not a vegetarian. He just forgot to order meat in the restaurant, or he's an environmental protection person, and we know for sure he's a vegetarian because he looks like a vegetarian. And 12 is actually an example that made me want to work on this project, because it's an example in our Chinese textbook, and a lot of English-speaking students have trouble understanding this sentence. They insist on knowing whether the person is indeed a vegetarian or not a vegetarian. And once again, for Chinese speakers, it doesn't bother us whether indeed it just looks like one. Whether it's a real one or not a fake one doesn't matter for us. And so context can help us decode counterfactuality. And also, Wu argues that there are some lexical items for counterfactuality. So for example, 13, I 以为 you go. I thought that you go. So whenever you have 以为, the 以为 is the same as in I thought. So whenever you have 以为, the lexical item, you know this sentence is the counterfactual. Means you wouldn't go. I thought that you would go, but you didn't go. So it's counterfactual. And also 14, 要不是. So I got the idea from Professor Robert Henderson. He asked, I never thought about this, 要不是. 要不是 means if not for. You seek I then go, perfected means completion, means if you hadn't asked for me, I would have gone. So it's, if you have 要不是, the sentence must be interpreted as counterfactual too. And you might think it's so funny, how I teach Chinese linguistics at Wayne State. How could it be possible that I never knew how to realize counterfactuality in my native language? Well, I can tell you it's true. That's a disadvantage of the need to speak a language that doesn't have a grammatical marking. So I have to really do a lot of enumeration in my mind to see is this sentence ungrammatical, counterfactual or factual. So it's not like grammar marking can tell you systematically, this is counterfactual and this is not. But for me, speaking language, it doesn't have systematic marking. I have to go sift the examples one by one. So I have to decide this one is not. And okay, and then I'm always my research focuses on Chinese syntax. So I'm always curious to see is there any syntactic tools in Chinese to mark counterfactuality. And you might have noticed so far a lot of our examples are conditional clauses. If I had been to the moon, if he took the medicine. So you can see counterfactuality and conditional clauses usually go hand by hand. So the first step, reasonable step, maybe let's take a look at conditional clauses in general and specifically in Chinese. So conditionals, so Bad and Pancheva 2006 divided the conditional clauses into three larger groups. First, hypothetical. If you are late, I will get upset. And the one indicator for the hypothetical conditional clause is the use of a then. You can add a then there. If you are late, then I'll get upset. I think the possibility of using then indicates a strong causal relation between the antecedent, if you are late, and the consequent, I will get upset. So there's direct causal relation. I get upset is the result, is caused by your being late. And also number 16, example of relevance conditional. If you are thirsty, there's water. You cannot add a then there. So one indicator for a relevance conditional is that you cannot use then. You cannot say if you're thirsty, then there's water in the refrigerator. So because whether there's water in the refrigerator or not is not caused by if you are thirsty. Your thirst has nothing to do, has no direct causal effect on the existence of water in the refrigerator. So, and that's a relevance clause, a relevance conditional. And also there's a factual conditional. So for example, if he's smart, why didn't he find a job? So the characteristics of a factual conditional is that they involve presupposition, because you presume that smart people must have a job. Therefore, if he doesn't have a job, probably if he doesn't have a job, probably there's something wrong. He should have a job. So there are three types of counterfactual, conditional clauses. And also, we talk about conditionals are commonly used in counterfactuality. And so, for example, 18 is an example in English. Had I cooked, I wouldn't have been here. You can see in English, inversion can only be used for counterfactual conditionals. So had I cooked, I wouldn't have been here can be translated, paraphrased as if I had cooked, the same thing. But you can only do inversion for the counterfactual situation. You cannot say, do I cook? Then I will give you some food. You can only say, if I cook, I will give you some. The inversion is only allowed within a counterfactual situation, subjunctive situation. And number 19 is from Henderson, 2010. If not for Mary going to the store, I wouldn't have salsa. So it's a counterfactual. Whenever in English, whenever you have if not for, it's guaranteed that this sentence will be interpreted as counterfactual. There's no exception. So again, you can see by changing we call it complementizer. Complementizer is something like if that introduces a clause, a conditional clause. If the conditional clause has if not for the complementizer, specialized complementizer, this sentence must be interpreted as counterfactual. And also 20 example from Slovenian. So that I had would to you lend. If I had that, I would lend it to you. So you can see Slovenian has several complementizers, but if you choose da, this sentence must be interpreted as counterfactual. Like English, if you choose if not for to start a conditional clause, it must be counterfactual. If you choose if, it can be ambiguous between counterfactual and factual. And also, the example 20 also is really telling in that, so look, the Slovenian has past tense, but we don't see past tense used in 20. And we said that past tense is frequently seen in European languages when it comes to marking counterfactual. So probably once you have chosen a specialized complementizer, past tense is no longer needed. So as long as you have one way of telling the speaker or the hearer that this sentence is counterfactual, you don't need another operator. So there are two ways. So far, there are two ways of marking counterfactual. Exclusion operator, either a past tense or spatial exclusion like in Burmese, or a specialized conditional, specialized complementizer. So there are two ways so far we can see. And Chinese 要不是 21 is the same thing. 要不是 means if not be, means if not for. So you can see the similarity between Chinese 要不是 21 and English 19 if not for. They both have not in it. So it's not a coincidence. We'll see why it's not a coincidence. And of course they have if too. Okay. So we have seen that tense and conditional clauses are responsible for marking counterfactuality. So it may be reasonable for me to see how Chinese involves conditional clause and time reference, because Chinese doesn't have tense. I'll call it time reference to indicate counterfactuality versus non-factual factuality. So, for example, 22. If I be you. So this sentence doesn't have any past reference. It's ambiguous. The time reference is ambiguous. And I don't even need to write out the consequent, the following example. I can tell you if a conditional clause doesn't have past time reference, this conditional clause is ambiguous. It can either be if I am the teacher, blah, 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 or if I were the teacher, blah, blah, blah. So it's ambiguous. You have to rely on the context or your knowledge of the world in order to see whether I'm indeed a teacher or just hypothetically a teacher. And number 23, if tomorrow rain. So again, if it's tomorrow, it's not past time reference, and this sentence is ambiguous. It can either mean if it would rain, if it would rain tomorrow, or if it rains tomorrow. So 23 is out. So it has nothing, doesn't guarantee counterfactuality really. But 24, if yesterday rained, I then not will go. So first, there's past time reference, yesterday. Whenever you have a past adverbial, the sentence must be in the past time reference. And also, you can see the highlighted green 就 is the English equivalent of then. So this sentence can only be interpreted counterfactually. If it had rained yesterday, I would not have gone. It's not ambiguous anymore. Not like 20 or 23, where there's no a past time reference. And do native speakers agree with me? It's 2024 it must be counterfactual. 要是昨天下雨，我就不会去。Probably means they didn't rain. Just, do you agree? So it's a 23. If you have past time reference in a hypothetical conditional clause, it's guaranteed this interpretation. The whole sentence is counterfactual. But 25 was wrong. 25 is not a counterfactual. So if yesterday rained, weather station would record. This sentence is, although it has past time reference yesterday, but it's not a hypothetical conditional because you cannot add then there. Otherwise, it sounds, if it rained, then otherwise it sounds like the raining causes the record in the TV weather station. So it's but you cannot use Jiu in 25. 要是昨天下雨，气象站就会记录。But you can't take my word for it. So just because 25 is not hypothetical, conditional, although it has past time reference, it's not a counterfactual sentence. Okay, so far we can see that probably in Chinese, if you have a past time reference in a hypothetical conditional, the sentence is guaranteed to be counterfactual interpretation. And that's so at least I can tell that Chinese indeed has one way syntactically to secure counterfactual reading of a sentence. But this can only be past counterfactual reading. It cannot be present or future. And so first, why must this happen only in a hypothetical conditional clause? My argument is that because hypothetical conditional requires very strong causal relation between the antecedent and the consequent, but relevance and factual conditionals do not require such a causal relation. So that means that counterfactuality, really the result, the consequent of the antecedent, there must be a causal relation because of A, therefore, so if I had been to the moon, then I would have seen it. So being to the moon causes me being able to see the thing. So causal relationship is really important in a counterfactual marking, and therefore I think that hypothetical conditional is required. And and also the past time reference might be more reliable than past tense when it comes to detecting past counterfactual. So Chinese doesn't have tense, but as long as you can interpret the thing as a past reference, either from the context or from the time of the verbal, you know it must be past. So whenever you have past reference in a hypothetical clause, a conditional clause, it's counterfactual. And so I think I moderate Yatridu's past tense as exclusion moderator to past time reference. So I think I have enlarged the past candidates, the circles, in terms of what plays a role in the constructing counterfactuality. And such a moderation will also include more tenseless languages. The Yatridu mainly looks like languages that have tense marking. And also, so why does Chinese only have past counterfactual but not present counterfactual? English is both. English has past counterfactual and present counterfactual, and English can do future too if it rains tomorrow. But why does Chinese only have past? I think probably typologically, if a language can only have the choice of marking one type of counterfactuality, probably it must start with the past. If a language can do two, it's going to be present. If a language can do three, it's going to be future. There is an implicational relation between what a language chooses to mark as counterfactualities. So basically, I'm saying that if a language, I hypothesize that if a language has only one kind of counterfactuality, it must be past tense. If a language has two, it must be past and present. If a language has three, past, present, and future. And so this is not really surprising cross-linguistic. For example, English is past tense and present tense. And English really doesn't have a very good future tense. Because if you speak, again, if you study French and Spanish, you have to memorize what future tense is like. You have to memorize the verb form. But in English, you don't need to. You have to memorize the ed form for past tense. I work, I worked. I am, I was. And you have to memorize the third person singular for present tense. He works, I work, whatever. But English, you never need to memorize the future tense marker. You just know whether if you see a will or be going to is future tense. But it's not on the verb. It's more like a structure. So you can see when it comes to tense assignment, languages seems to have prejudice, the preference or priority. And Chinese does the same thing when it comes to selecting a counterfactuality along the timeline. Okay. And also, so we're talking about the past time reference being useful in marking counterfactuality. Actually, past tense in conditional, even in English, doesn't guarantee counterfactual. So for example, 23, 26, if you took the syrup, it will get better. It has nothing to do with counterfactuality. I'm just telling you the result of him having taken the medication. So it's called future less vivid, but it's not counterfactuality. 27, if he took the syrup, he would be taller. That's a present counterfactual. So it's in English, in order to interpret whether the if clause indeed leads to counterfactuality, you have to look at the whole sentence. But once, if you have to use if not for, it must be counterfactual. It must, okay. So now we know that in Chinese, if you have a past time reference in a conditional clause, this sentence must be interpreted as past counterfactual. Then we talked about there are two factors that contribute to the construction of counterfactuality: specialized complementizer or past tense or past time reference. Or what does Chinese have specialized complementizer when it comes to past counterfactual realization? So Nevins 2002 argued that the exclusion operator can also be semantics of a conditional complementizer. Especially, we have seen that Slovenian da in English, if not for, and in Chinese, 要不是. So some languages have the specialized complementizer too. So 要不是, if not be, argued by Ippolito and Su 2009, they argue that you can see the negation in 要不是, if not be, not is a negation. So they argue that the negation is required by the exhaustivity of the antecedent, means the 要不是 clause, the conditional clause, with effective expression for the fact it is sufficient and necessary for counterfactuality in the consequent. Basically, that says that 要不是 the negation is required because 要不是 can be interpreted as now let's get rid of all the fact, and the one fact that is left there that reserved will be enough to create this kind of counterfactual situation. So we call it exhaustivity. So after excluding all the other possibilities, this one alone at least will determine whether the sentence is counterfactual or not. So like English, if not for, basically it means if not for the fact that blah blah blah, he would have just, that's the last possibility after the exhaustivity. And but it's really interesting. Ippolito and Su argue that exhaustivity must be accompanied by a negator, like English, if not for. English doesn't have if for, right? English has only if not for. English doesn't have if for. And Chinese has if 要不是 means if not be. But if you once you have if be 要是, it's not counterfactual anymore. So exhaustivity always shows up hand in hand with the negator. It seems to be universal linguistically. So German does something like this, Chinese does something like this, and English does something like this. And so for example 28, 要不是 you seek I and then go perfected means if you hadn't asked for me, I would have gone. It must be interpreted counterfactually. It cannot be if you ask for me, I will not go. That cannot be interpreted that way at all. Okay, so we said that in Chinese, if you put a time reference in a conditional clause, a hypothetical conditional clause, there's past counterfactuality interpretation. But will 要不是 help us make Chinese a little bit more advanced? Will 要不是 help us help Chinese realize counterfactuality in the future or at present, in addition to be the past? It's true. The answer is yes. So 29. If not for your help, I then not fail. And without your help, I would not have failed. So it's a past counterfactuality. I put a 不 in the 不 not in the parenthesis to show you that 要不是 works with both affirmative sentence and negative sentence. So it doesn't matter whether you put a not there or not. It's still counterfactuality. So 要不是 in 29 can help us realize past counterfactuality. 30. If not for you, I yesterday or now will be happy. So it's if not for you, I would be happy. I'd be very happy. I'm not happy in these days because of you. And so that's a present counterfactuality. So that's one step forward compared with a past reference in conditional, in hypothetical conditional. So Chinese does have present counterfactuality with the help of 要不是. And so you can see, but 30 is interesting. 30, we said that only hypothetical conditional can help realize a counterfactual. But in 30, 就 is not allowed. When I put an asterisk before 就 means it cannot be there. It's ungrammatical. And I think first because this is no longer, so since we have a specialized complementizer, whether the conditional is hypothetical or not really doesn't matter anymore. And second, I think the predicate, the verb in 30 is happy. It's more static. You know, happy is a static, it's a individual level predicate. But in 30, in 29, 失败 is to fail. It's more dynamic. So I think the 就, whether you have 就 or not, whether you have then or not, is really a result of the predicate type. So you don't need to worry too much about this. But 2030 just tells you that Chinese does have present counterfactuality in 要不是 structure. And 31, if not for your help, I now then will be wasting time. If not for your helping me, now I would be wasting time. So, so here we must have 就, because I guess wasting time is dynamic predicate. So 20, 30, 31 tells us that now, indeed, with the help of 要不是, Chinese can have counterfactual for present and for past. And so the data 32, 34 have never been discussed in the literature, and that's something I want to talk about. So we talk about 就, the English equivalent of then can be used in if not be 要不是 clause. No one has ever talked about use of 才. 才 is a negative focus adverb. So for example, 32, if not for you, I 才 means not until. Not until, not will fail. Means if not for you, I would not have failed. And 33, you see the little asterisk before the sentence, means the sentence is ungrammatical. If not for you help, I not until will fail. So the difference between 33 and 32 is that 33 doesn't have the negator 不, and 33 is ungrammatical. So native speakers agree with me, it sounds awkward, right? 要不是你帮我，我才会失败. Right? You prefer to say 要不是你帮我，我才不会失败, right? So if you use 才 as to lead the consequent clause, you must have a negator. And 34 example of present counterfactual. If not for no money, I now 才 not will study progressive, means if not for lacking money, I will not study now. So you can see that if you cai in the consequent, in the second part of the counterfactual clause, not must be used too. Negation must be used too. But this is not the case for hui. Hui is a jiu. Jiu is the Chinese equivalent of English then. You can either have a negator or not, but if you cai, you must have the negator. And that's a very curious question. Cai is a very interesting adverb. It means not until. And it has some negative entailment. So for example, 37.1, I come, perfected, means I have come. I completed the event of coming. And 37b, I not come, 我没来. So in Chinese, 了, the perfective, cannot co-occur with 没, so you have to drop the 了. So 我没来, you cannot say 我没来了. So 没, that tells us 没 and 了 cannot occur together. They're in complementary distribution. But if you cai, I 3 o'clock 才来, again, you cannot have 了. You can say I 3 o'clock 来了, that's fine. But I 3 o'clock 才来, you cannot have 了. So example 37 tell you that 才 has some negative entailment. Or although the native speakers ask them, how do you negate things in Chinese? They will not tell you. They will not think of 才, those things, 没 and 不. But 才indeed has the negative entailment. So now it would be interesting. So we said that 才 requires the existence of another negator, and 才itself has a negation negative entailment. So we all know the very basic principle. You have a negative, you have positive interpretation. But look at the example interpretation of 32 and 34. They all have, if not for you, I would not have failed. Or 34, if not for liking money, I would not study now. But still we have a negation there. So what are the two negators doing there? So we should have a positive interpretation, but still we have a negative interpretation. Yeah, so 35, 36 again tell us that cai must occur with negator. If not for your help, I not until. So I put the asterisk, this little star before the parenthesis, means that you must have it there. You cannot leave it out. But this it's not the case in 36. 就, if not for your help, I 就 will not fail. So 就 can either come with 不 or without 不. The 不 in parenthesis without the asterisk means it's optional. You can either have it or not. When you cai, you must have the negator. And that's a bit tricky. In English, you can either say, if I had been to the moon, I would have done something, or I would not have done anything. There's no requirement that in the second part of the counterfactual structure, you must have negator. But in Chinese, it's a very curious, peculiar case. Why must we have a negator in the second half of the counterfactual situation? And I have to admit that the use of cai sounds very emphatic. So it can be translated into English as by no means. So let's take a look again at 35 and 36. 35, if you have cai, it's better translated as without your help, by no means would I have ever failed. So it sounds emphatic. But 36, doesn't sound as emphatic as 35 with cai. So what I argue is that cai has the exhaustive interpretation. Remember, cai means not until. When you talk about not until, really you're excluding a lot of factors until after you have exhausted all the possibilities. You would say, and then the condition or the situation is reached. So there's an exhaustivity involved in the use semantics of cai too. And so basically cai means not until the counterfactual condition did this happen. So there's some exhaustivity involved. And remember, we're talking about Ippolito and Su 2009. They argue that the exhaustivity must license a negator in order to be interpreted as counterfactual in the antecedent. Because we said that in languages that have a specialized complementizer like English, if not for Chinese, 要不是, and German, there must be a not. And also we talked about the exhaustivity in the conditional clauses that are led by, if not be, 要不是. So negation and exhaustivity usually come hand by hand. And also now we see that 才 indeed has some exhaustivity interpretation. So probably that's the reason why 才 cannot occur unless there's another negator, at least in the situation, under a condition of counterfactuality expression. Okay, so now the conclusions. So Chinese does have syntactic tools for counterfactual interpretation in addition to lexical and contextual tools. And one way syntactically for Chinese to mark counterfactuality is to put past reference in a hypothetical conditional clause. And the past reference functions as the exclusion operator, as Yatridu has argued. And also Chinese has another way of realizing counterfactuality, which is the specialized complementizer 要不是, which means if not be, it's the same as English if not for. And also I talked about why if you use 要不是, 才, 不 a modal verb, this kind of a counterfactual, why must negator be used there? I argue that negator is licensed by exhaustivity in 才, as a negator is the same as a negator in if not for in English and 要不是 if not be in Chinese. So that's all. Questions? Robert?
Just one thing. So you're talking about English future being weak in some way, or sort of weaker version of tense. I think it's fine to even say that English has no future tense. Like
has no future tense.
Yeah, this has been argued like extensively that will is not future tense at all. It's actually modal. And there's like all sorts of examples that try to show this, or that appear to show this. Are things like you can use will for generic reasons, like I don't know, foam will float on water. Right? You're not. It seems like you're not talking about some sort of future time period where foam is floating on water, sort of in general. Or like these like epistemic readings of will. So, like you're like, oh, where is the chair right now? Oh, she'll be in her office. Right?
Yeah, she will be in her office. So
yeah, but like you're asking where is she right now, and you're making an epistemic claim about her location using will. So I think Dori Abush is like the citation for this in 1998. She argued Dori Abush in 1998 has a paper that's like, I think it's called something like will is not future tense or something like that.
Okay.
And so I mean this is like still hotly debated, but I mean if you want to say that will is not even tense, English has no future tense, you can probably get away with it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I found what you talk about Thai is fascinating. I wonder if this is an example of counterfactual, because I know so little about linguistics. 如果我学了，我才知道。
如果我学了，
如果我去了，我才高兴。
如果我去了，我才会高兴。如果 OK
就没有那个否定的。
So Yuning found a potential counterexample to show that 才 must co-occur with 不. Her example is, it literally means I won't be happy until I've been there. So, and I think this is not counterfactual. In English, it's not considered counterfactual. In fact, I won't be happy until I have been there. That's a English translation of the Chinese sentence, right? So I think that's not just telling you the condition. How could I be happy? Like the condition of being happy that I have to be there. I must have been there. So I think very good. So I think that in that case, 才 and 不 do not need to co-occur. I think that's a very good observation. So probably that means 才 and 不 must co-occur only in the counterfactual situation 要不是. I think that's a good example. Thank you.
I had a kind of similar question. In Japanese, there are verbs that require negation. Except there's like this weird exception if the verb is really negative. There's a verb to mean different or wrong, and that's the only case. Everyone tells you it's ungrammatical, but everyone says it. So it's supposed to be, oh, that's not at all correct, but it's like that's not at all different, but you really mean that's completely wrong.
Okay.
Is there a verb in Chinese? It's like that is just completely wrong.
I know. Yeah, I think probably you're talking about, we call it expletive negation. The negation there, just doing nothing. I think Yeah, let me see. I think explicit negation. Yeah, I think English. I think it's something similar in English might be. Don't you know that you are supposed to be in the class? Because I'm not saying that you don't. I'm asking you. So the not there really for rhetorical questions. It doesn't have any. It's not negating anything. But so if that does it sound similar to the use of negator in Japanese? No.
It's just that it always requires, it's an adverbial that always requires negation, except there's like one special case where there's a verb that means different. And because that verb has such a negative feeling, people are allowed to use it without negation.
Negative feeling means undesirable. It's bad. It's pathetic. Without negative.
It has a feeling of negation without actually being
okay,
a negator.
yeah. Like, okay, yeah. So, okay. It's like English few. I have few friends. Basically means I don't have friends. I have little water left. Basically I have no water left. So it's, although it doesn't have negation.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess I'm just asking if there's a verb that has really strong negative meanings that isn't actually grammatically negative.
Grammatically positive, but has a negative meaning.
Yeah, grammatically positive, but semantically it's really negative.
Yeah. Okay.
The semantics is enough to provide the negation.
I know what you mean. Yeah. I can think of some adverbs, but off the top of my head, I cannot think of verbs. I think of almost, for example, is a negator. I'm almost there. Basically means I'm not there. The same thing in Chinese and English. So, but for verbs, I can think, that'd be very interesting to test if we have such a verb in Chinese. Is testing to see whether the not is still required in Tsai structure. Otherwise, you have 3 negators in a row. Is that what you mean? Yes, but we can talk. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I'll look into that.
I was gonna say, you might think of like verbs like doubt.
Doubt.
Right, so doubt, like licenses negative polarity items.
Yeah.
Even though,
Sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah, doubt, 怀疑 I think 质疑问怀疑我要不是你问我才不怀疑我才怀疑 Yeah, I think you still have to use not. If not for you pushing me, by no means would I ever doubt that. 要不是你催我，我才不会怀疑呢。Cannot say 我才怀疑呢。But okay, I'll think of I'll think.
But I had another question actually about the obligatory counterfactuality when you have past adverbials, these hypothetical conditionals in Chinese.
You must have then.
You have to have the then.
Then, that's a hypothetical, like
Yeah.
English. Yeah.
So I was worried about cases. So like we have these past counterfactuals that are not, there's all these different terms. Past. I think they're called past predictive, or sometimes called epistemic conditional. So things like, if John mailed it if John mailed it overnight mail 2 days ago, it arrived yesterday. It's not counter to fact, right? It's just like, I don't know. And I'm doing like a past prediction.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I know. It's,
Or
I know what you mean.
Or like if someone famous picked like, I don't know, like if Kant submitted an abstract to a conference last year, it was accepted.
I know.
It's not counterfactual. It's just,
Yeah.
I just don't know, but I'm giving a past prediction.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you get those
In Chinese.
and then it would be maybe a counterexample to
A counterexample to
like necessary counterfactuality when you have then and past adverbials.
I think I don't know. I think the example's English. If you mailed it yesterday, it has arrived. Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's more like subjunctive. I mean, it's not counterfactual. It may be subjunctive.
People call these subjunctive.
People call it subjunctive.
Yeah.
They're like, I demand that he. I demand that he leave now, or it's high time that we went home. Can you say that? It's high time that we went home.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's correct.
You can say that.
But I mean, the contrast is between things like, if you mailed it yesterday, it arrived, versus if if he had mailed it yesterday, it would have arrived. In the second case, it's he didn't, and it's not, it didn't. Right, in the second case, it's I don't know.
Right. I see. I see. Yeah, it's like,
And
I think
that's what we indicate with the double past tense, like the fake past gives you the counterfactual reading.
It must be counterfactual.
If he had mailed it versus if he mailed it.
I don't know whether it's something similar to the future less vivid. Is usually people talk about
with future less vivid though, you have the consequent takes place in the future. Where in this case, both the antecedent and the consequent take place in the past.
I see.
We just don't know whether they're true or not.
I see. Okay.
I see something to think about.
Okay, I'll think about it. Yeah. But English relies on the tense in order to realize that. So
so if you have two pasts, then you get counterfactual because one of them is fake. If you have one layer of past, then you don't get counterfactual.
I see.
It's not ambiguous. You just get the you get this epistemic or whatever, or past predictive.
I see. Yeah. So again, English has really, there's no ambiguity. Once it's past counterfactual, you know it's past counterfactual. But when it's present, it's ambiguous. You have to rely on whether it's epistemic, what the context is. So okay, so English seems to have the preference too.
Yeah.
In China, I guess they have a block of dialects in the north and another in the south.
Yeah.
Would you say that the differences between these groups of dialects would be like that between Romance languages and Germanic, or are they closer?
It's a very good question. So Chinese has a lot of dialects. The largest two groups are northern and southern. And southern has 6 subgroups. And the question is, so how large is the difference? I think you can say, I don't know. For example, Dr. Wu speaks Fujian Min dialect, and it's like a foreign language to me. I can understand anything. I can understand English better than Min dialect. I think the difference is, I don't know whether its analogy would be a Germanic versus Romance, or at least I think it's English versus German. Within Germanic, I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know, but it'd be interesting too to see how dialects handle situations like this. Because the funny thing is that Mandarin, everything is Mandarin. Mandarin has only 3 negators: mei, bu, and imperative. But in other dialects, Mandarin is really poor in terms of number of negators. If you look at other dialects, I think it'd be more interesting to see what kind of negators can appear in a counterfactual situation. Probably they allow more negators to show up. In Mandarin, only bu can be there in Yao Bu Shi. Any other questions?